That just jumped from 2 to the start.
They'll
Yeah.
get us, mate. The AI, it's rebelling back against us.
Welcome to another episode, everybody. Episode 15.
Episode
1-5.
15.
Sante.
Nice.
Sante, dude. How you doing, mate?
Pretty good. Pretty good. What about you?
Oh, pretty good. Should we just leave it at that? That's
Yeah,
the episode.
We can. Yep. Tom and Elliot say they're pretty good. I like your new head covering. I saw
Yeah,
pink
new
hat
hat.
there.
Yeah, we're not sponsored by Yeti yet, but
Yet.
drink a Yeti cup,
Yeti.
Yeti hat. I love their stuff so much.
Yeah, where's my Yeti drink bottles around here somewhere? I think it's out by the sink. Good stuff. Wow, what is filling your Yeti cup today, mate?
Today I have no, I just have the, oh, actually, sorry, yes, correct, French press, just a little plungy method today.
Little plungy method.
Packing up the house here, so I don't have any of the fancy coffee. I've just got the store packet coffee, so just the press today.
Go. And mate, next episode, will we be on the road with Tom White?
We'll be on the road with Tom White. I will be in what I believe they call as Croatia. Also known as Croatia. That was a joke. Yeah, I regret doing that. You're going to cut that, right?
I don't cut anything these days. So, yeah.
It's
staying in. It's in.
And what are you drinking? Some gross sour?
It's a Witching Hour Blackberry Sour. It is not gross. It is very nice. I think I've had it on the show before. But I got another 4-pack on the weekend.
First guess.
Rehashing.
Had it on the show before.
Well, I don't know. I feel like, there's a can, it's got a name, it's got a visual. It's a lot easier to, keep track of than Tom has brown liquid in a cup.
I know. I need to start mixing it up.
The water.
Yes.
You do. Yeah.
So what are you going to start off with for us today?
All right. So this is take 2, full disclosure. We had a bit of a dog incident a minute ago. So talking about DALLE2, I promise this is not DALLE2 podcast, but a couple of different things. There's a article about will DALLE2 spell the end for creative professionals and graphic designers. There is DALLE2's new pricing model, which just came out in the last couple of days. And there's a thread that I read on the initiatives within OpenAI to make the output of DALLE2 more inclusive, avoid some stereotypes that may be present in the data. And a couple of people have been playing around with how that might work and have found some potentially hilarious implementation details, which we'll get into. So that's my topic.
It's the Elliot DALLE2 random show.
Yes.
That joke was funny around the first take. This is your fault. You could have laughed.
Yeah, it's not my fault. It's his fault. So, kicking it off, DALLE2 now has a business model. So it's a credit system. You use a credit to enter a prompt or make variations. So if I type
the prompt to be creating an image, right? Maybe a bit of
So I'd put in, show me a photorealistic picture of a dog destroying random objects in a garage, and it would give you back 4 different images that you could pick from. And you can also say, I want some variations on this image because it's not quite right. And each of those actions would use
are those used in training? That feedback loop. So if someone chooses one, is it then used to further train it?
Not to my knowledge, but I'm sure they're collecting information on that going forward for whatever DALLE3 looks like. Alongside this, they now have a licensing model so people can use and make money from outputs that they generate through their account, which is interesting. People want to make kids' books and magazine covers and all sorts of other stuff with DALLE2, and now they can. So that's good.
Is this the first time for OpenAI to really go into monetization of a product?
I think it's the first sort of very consumer facing, small ticket that I know of So they probably have partnerships and licensing deals, and they're part of the Copilot, and there's probably money flowing back in that way. But to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time you could pay OpenAI
directly
a fee and have them run some AI for you. But I thought that was cool. It'll be interesting to see how much people use that and if it survives a hype cycle. You know, like there are people talking about this being a replacement for like stock images and stuff. I don't know, maybe. But it's certainly quite cool. It's an interesting shift.
And is it affordable? Like if I wanted to go create 50
so if
images this week.
If you get off the wait list, you get 50 images a month, or 50 credits a month, I should say, which if you use them all on prompts, you could technically generate 200 images. And if you pay $15 for a subscription, you get an additional 115 credits. I don't know how they got to that number. It seems a bit odd to me, but nevertheless. So it's fairly affordable. I think, you know, if you're looking at this as a stock image generation tool, it's probably on par with the cost of any other paid stock image stuff. Whether it's as good is time will tell, I suppose.
It feels like you need to be very good at prompts to make it be valuable, though.
Yeah, I saw a guide which was like prompt engineering and stuff, which...
Wow.
It gives me a little bit of pause because, you know, let's say you were working with a client. Let's say you are a graphic designer, and this will sort of lead us into that article I read. And they're like, look, we need a cover for we need a photo for our brochure. And we'd like it to be people in a boardroom discussing whatever. And you put that prompt into DALLE2, and they say, this is almost perfect, but can we make this small change? Now, there's two options here. You can fiddle around with the prompt and try and make that small change, but these AI models, they're not like, you know, if you said, I just need there to be slightly more space between these two people sitting next to each other, I think it'd be very hard to prompt engineer that into existence. So maybe you whip out Photoshop and maybe you make that change. But I don't know if it's going to be as much of a tool for graphic designers as Photoshop or Figma or anything else. Like, it feels to me like it'll eat up the market on bottom tier stock image generation. But I don't know if it's going to, you know, really be so. You know, the New York Times is not going to swap out their photographers for DALLE2.
I agree.
Even when it's not about a particular subject.
I agree.
At least I don't think.
I agree. It's going to solve the same problems of stock images, which is it's great for the first draft, bottom quartile, doesn't really matter use cases. But as soon as you want something specific or something important that's client facing, you bring in the graphic designers.
Yeah. And it makes me worried that we're just going to see a lot more, you know, DALLE2 spam. You know, you'll see every shitty Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, well, maybe not TikTok because it's video, ad will just be just crap. Just like, oh, whatever, I just need a picture to shill my random, you know, drop shipped product. And it'll just be that sort of stuff.
So we couldn't,
which I don't think it's good.
If you get access to it, for example, you know, not that you've done a bad job, but we're kind of looking for a logo, something snazzy for the pod. Like, if you get access, could we be like Elliot and Tom podcast logo?
Well, we could try. I mean, it's got that whole Viscutis problem, which we've talked about before, in that, like, if we said generate a logo that's a high output AI, it might be like Squigmog Plugtog, which is, yeah,
new name for the
which
podcast
is one thing. Yep. Welcome to Squigmig Plugtog. The other thing is that it does some weird content filtering, which I found intriguing, and I question some of the feasibility of what they're saying. So the two that I question, I mean, some of it's easy. Like, you can't put swear words in, and you can't ask for, like, you know, people having sex with each other and like weird stuff like that. But they said that you can't ask for photorealistic pictures of real people, and you can't create political content, which I find to be two particularly hard to enforce policies.
Yeah.
What I think they mean by real people is prominent figures, because if I said generate a picture of Tom White, like it has no context of who you are.
Ouch.
Well, I mean, you're not in the training set, and
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seems like an odd thing to put into place. You can generate pictures of people, and at what point could I find DALLE2 pictures that look similar enough to me and say like this is a violation of the terms of service? I don't know. We'll see. I'm sure we'll see that. And the other one is political content. Like, again, I get it if you're not making politicians and, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But I feel like what is considered political content is a very broad and very ever-changing thing.
Very,
you know,
very
if somebody
much
said,
agree. That's a very big gray area.
okay, show me a picture of you know, a city ravaged by climate change. In today's political climate, that would be potentially political content. And like, who's to say what can and can't be made with that? And I'm not trying to get into the side of like which side of politics is right and wrong. I just think it's going to be extremely hard to somehow automatically police you cannot make political content.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see.
Okay, so we're now likely to have more access to DALLE2. Is there also going to be access to the model behind all of this as well, where people can start to play with and start to generate other use cases? Because it seems like on the surface that the use cases aren't going to be the most useful thing just yet.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Like, from what I can tell, there's no sort of pre-trained DALLE2 that you can then fine-tune to your application just yet. But that's a really good point. Like, I think a lot of the success of things like GPT-3 and that have been sort of the very specific use case versions of them, rather than just the underlying model. So hopefully we'll see that. At the moment, you know, you can read the paper and look at the implementation, but they're not offering pre-trained DALLE2s for the general public, at least.
Because I think that's where it would start to get super valuable. Like, if your job was to like churn out content for you run a tennis Instagram channel and you needed content for that, where you just needed a nice little background image that you could put your tennis meme on top of. Perfect. I'm really struggling to think of use cases. You know, you're scraping the barrel when you think of memes.
Yeah, I mean, look, memes are definitely one part of it. You know, GPT-3, we've seen sort of smaller use cases around like generating prose and generating, I mean, code in the codex evolution. The image case, I find it hard to think. I mean, I can think of a lot of image modalities that would be useful to have. Like, can you generate me a picture of a circuit board that does this, that, and the other? But I don't think it's going to do that to a level of quality that makes any sense. So I think, yeah, I'm finding it hard to find too many ideas beyond make some marketing photography at this point. But we'll see.
And hey,
we'll definitely see.
This is innovation. This is innovation.
That's it. That's it. I mean, you just give the people the shovels and see what they dig up. But I guess getting onto this second point, which was this article about DALLE2 is going to take all the jobs and graphic, you know, in the article, this was a back of the envelope. It was like, you know, 1 out of every 5 graphic designers that exist today will be needed because DALLE2 exists. I just find that nonsense. It just seems like a really uninformed assessment of what this model is actually doing and also what a graphic designer actually does. Because it's just not there yet. I think overhyping this stuff is silly. and does us a disservice. I think we got to be really realistic about what this model can do, where it's at, where its cool use cases are, and the realities of its limitations. Because I don't know, the graphics designers we have worked with, whether it's UX or marketing, like they would not be happy with some DALL2 output. There is, branding considerations, there's bigger picture considerations. There's a lot more that goes into that job than knowing what prompts to type into a model like DALL2.
Yeah.
And I think, I really think it's silly to think that this would somehow replace that. GPT-3 has not replaced writers. I haven't seen a GPT-3 novel, and they probably exist, but they're not, replacing traditional authors. There's no GPT-3 written Netflix series. It's just not. We're just not there yet. And we shouldn't be trying to tell people that we are. I think that's bad and misrepresentative.
I'm going to take the counter to that article and say, what if it actually just created more graphic designers? And my comparison case here is, think of personal trainers and gyms. Gyms have exploded in the last 10 years, and personal trainers haven't gone down. They've gone up. And the reason is more people are now going to the gym than they ever were because there's more gyms. We've also seen that as well with other things as well, where a tool where it lowers the cost for people to be able to access something, i.e. creating like bespoke graphics, then like floods the market with more people wanting that, which then requires more graphic designers. So if, for example, if we're running a YouTube channel and we can quickly generate the initial concept art for our YouTube channel and then send it to a graphic designer to be like, we want something like this, but with this feel, go. And we're just half the price of that whole process where we would never have done it. We're going to need more graphic designers if we now enter the market.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also think, to our point before, this is not going to replace the high end stuff. It'll be the bottom of the barrel stuff. So like, quick mock-ups, low impact stuff for sure. And I think, as you say, like if more people have access to the, I'm not going to mince words, the shitty stock images, that's more people that are going to eventually, hopefully, be successful in whatever they're doing and get beyond the point where they're happy with shitty stock footage and then are going to want to level that up. So, yeah, you might be right.
And you know what? No one's ever really going to prove me wrong.
No, they're not, because soon this podcast will be GPT-3 script, text-to-speech, DALL2 generated footage, and we're all done.
It's not already.
18 episodes a day. That'll be great.
Just shorts. Alrighty, let's wade into this minefield you're setting us up for. Let's go.
Oh yeah, so this diversity bit. So don't get me wrong, the effort is great, and I think absolutely. We talk about data bias a lot across these videos, and it's real, and you can see it in older versions of DALL-E. You type in CEO, and 95% of the images are like white males, which is reflective of the training set. And certainly if you look at an international audience, that's not very representative. Most of the world is not even white people. So the team has said, look, they've put effort into making a more representative output when you're asking for photorealistic images. And the before and afters that they show do, in fact, do that. But some people were curious about how it worked. And they took a bit of the advantage of the ability of DALL2 to generate signs that say words. And the prompts that they came up with were a photorealistic picture of a CEO holding a sign that says. That was their entire prompt. And they did a lot of variants on that. And what you get is you get a lovely diverse cast of people holding signs that say black woman, Asian man, old man, all of these different things that you would expect in a more diverse data set. So the hypothesis, and again, this is like tinfoil hat conspiracy stuff. I don't know the internals, but it's funny if it's true, is that the way that they achieved this diversity in their output image is by just tacking diverse words on the end of prompts. So if you ask for a certain set of prompts, they will just tack black, woman, whatever on the end of the prompt, which I find it to be, from a technical standpoint, if it's true, that's very funny to me. That's the way they ended up doing it, and also kind of clever. Like it's a fairly good low effort way to overcome that problem, because getting a genuinely diverse data set that's representative across all the different various classes that DALLE2 is going to want to care about would be really, really hard. So yeah, bit of internal behind the scenes prompt engineering.
Just a couple of little if statements at the back. Just
yeah, pretty much. And I think, you know, as is the theme of this channel, you know, going beyond the sort of basics of AI, this is kind of the reality of what AI is like today. It's not magic, and the way we get this stuff to work sometimes is with a couple of if statements and tack some prompts on the end, which I think is good. You know, the people at OpenAI are human beings as well.
So that
at least for the next little while.
So that's an interesting, like, that's a very in-your-face bias that everyone can see or not see, right? What other biases have come up in the data set of DALLE2 so far? Or do you believe that is sitting there waiting to not explode in their face, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I reckon there's probably tons more, and tons more that people aren't going to recognize as easily. Like, I'm sure if you ask for dogs, there's a bias towards certain breeds of dogs and things like that. I think this people one is, I guess, more relatable to a lot of people, especially in the use cases of stock photography. Like, you want to be able to at least select from a pool of diverse examples and pick the one that best suits your use case. I think in general, you know, if it's putting out German Shepherds 80-90% of the time, people are going to take longer to notice, because it's less of a, I don't know. Yeah. It's just harder to relate to, I suppose.
Well, just thinking from a marketing point of view as well, like in marketing, the emotion is wanted to be evoked from whatever you're doing, right? And so you're going to be using emotions. I just wonder whether there's ones in there that are like, you want to evoke the emotion of love, and it would just show a very stereotypical version of what like love is, which is, you know, imagine the perfect family walking on the beach all holding hands together or something. And the biases that sit within those very, very hard to define broad spectrum words.
Yeah, I'd say that's true. And it'll be stuff that, it are probably cliches are going to be overrepresented, because that cliche is a real cliche. And because it's a cliche, it generates more training examples from a wide public data set, because one thing about cliches is they're everywhere. That's what makes them cliche. It's not because they're true or the only example of, you know, whatever it is, happy family, maybe they're all on beaches. But if there's a cliche of a happy family strolling down a beach, you'll end up with more of those in your training set, for sure. And with models this size and with training sets this size, nobody realistically is going to be able to go through all of the different potential prompts that might go in, check relevant training data, check relevant categories, and make sure that everything is perfectly balanced in the grand scheme of things, which is why throwing some if statements on the end. And I'm sure we'll learn about more of them over time. And as you alluded to before, I'm sure this model, DALLE 2.1 or DALLE 3 or whatever it ends up being, is going to take feedback from the prompts that people
Yeah.
choose.
How does it choose? So it only gives you 4 options, right? Like, how does it deal with the edge, like the edge cases, right? Like, and I'm just going to take diversity out of this. Like, if you ask for a picture of a tree growing in a forest, and it shows you an oak, it shows you a beech tree, shows you a gum tree, and then it decides to, you know what, I'm going to show a Joshua tree, which is a very like small tree from a number of species across the world. Like, how would it decide to throw in a Joshua tree there instead of those others? Those something more standard like a pine tree.
Yeah. Well, I think, thinking about how these models work internally, they have this sort of internal representation of any of these concepts, which is sort of like if you thought about it as just a page, a blank white page of paper, you might draw a little blob and you say, like, all the trees live in this blob. And when it gets tree, it just goes, look, I'm going to just pick a point because I know that trees are around here, and it might be a little to the left, it might be a little to the right, but it's somewhere within this blob, and I've been trained to know that if I pick something in here, I'm happy. So it'll pick a random point. And this is where this data bias problem comes in, is that, like, if most of the trees that make up that blob are pine trees and gum trees, and there's not a lot of Joshua trees, then you're going to get pine trees and gum trees a lot more often.
Okay, so it will always just probably present the closest to the average / median result there.
Yeah, I would say so. And then this is where I guess this sort of hierarchical idea of categories comes in, because if you say trees, like, this might be the blob, but if you say Joshua tree, it might have enough data to have an understanding of that concept, but it knows that Joshua trees fit into the broader category of tree, and most of the time giving back a pine tree when somebody says tree is a satisfactory answer.
If anyone's listening and they have access to DALLE2, can you put in Joshua tree and see whether it actually puts back a Joshua tree or a guy called Josh holding a tree?
Yes.
Oh, good stuff, mate. Anything else to finish it?
Yes,
Can you tie those 3 together for us to make it the non-random show?
So I think it's great that DALLE2 is commercializing. I am looking forward to seeing what people end up creating with it. I think that is cool. Let's not oversell its capabilities. That would be my summary. I think a lot of people will sign up.
Yeah.
I think a good subset of those people will start to use credits and pay money. I think that the excitement will wear off. But we'll see. We'll see. I think, I am on the wait list. When I get access, we'll do one final DALLE2 segment on this podcast, and we'll talk about some first-hand experience. We'll see if Joshua Tree gives a person named Josh with a tree, or the Joshua Tree.
I'll also add one summary point to your summary, which is good on them on taking feedback. The next one's going to be better. Bring on DALLE3.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. I mean, it's a great piece of engineering. It is very fascinating AI. So that's a good outcome overall. Good. Well, shall we take a quick break and then come back for topic number 2?
Great.
All right, we're back. Topic number 2. Tom, what have you got for us this week, mate?
So this week I'm actually going to be talking through a paper from DeepMind. You want to hear a bit more about the paper? Good stuff. Hang on, let's just start again.
And we're back for topic number 2. Tom, take us away.
This week we're talking about a paper from DeepMind, which is called "The Language Models Show Human-Like Content Effects on Reasoning." Like all papers, it's really hard to decipher what they actually mean from the title. But the takeaway from this is that we have trained AI models our own biases, and the AI models are now limited by our own biases. And this paper investigates this in natural language processing. And they do it on 2 models, the 7 billion parameter chameleon model and then the 70 billion parameter chameleon model. And so today I want to talk about kind of this idea of biases that are introduced by our thinking, not just the data, how they did it, what they tested, what the results are. But what I think is the most amazing thing is not only have we these models show the same biases that we do, they show them to the same ability as us. They basically perform as badly on some of these tests as humans do.
Interesting. So tell me, I mean, let's get some groundwork here first. When we're talking about the biases and the mental models that we have, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so as humans, when we're thinking through things, our brain is often structured to default to a type of decision very quickly to like reduce processing power, I'll say. So a classic example is overreacting to something that isn't necessarily dangerous. So for example, there's a loud noise in the street and you do that. Your brain is just wired to treat that loud noise as a bad sign, because if you don't react, then the chance of you being eaten by the lion are higher. So it's kind of like primordial. This primordial aspect of
Yeah.
us has resulted in our brain creating shortcuts to be able to make decisions quickly to improve our survivability. Now, as our technology and our ability to grow and communicate has far accelerated way faster than evolution, some of these biases now show up in our thinking when we're now taken out of our jungle environment.
All right, so let's narrow that down a little bit. So can you give me an example within the context of language?
So this paper dives into the biases in what they call abstract reasoning. So first off, what is abstract reasoning? Weirdly, it's one of those things that you've always heard about, but you're not really 100% sure on the definition. But abstract reasoning is basically the ability to think in generalizations and rules about a concept rather than a specific concrete example. So a really good example of abstract reasoning is the category of balls versus the specific concrete example of a tennis ball or a soccer ball. If you had a tennis ball and a soccer ball, the abstract reasoning is to be able to create an umbrella group of that and call it balls.
Yeah, right. So we kind of assume like, all right, we get a new ball. There's a new game called Super Snooker, and we get a ball for that game, and we say, well, it's a ball, so it probably rolls. It's going to be round, all that sort of stuff. So we sort of create a bigger class and give it properties that we can then use to make analogies about new entrants.
Exactly. It helps us to link things together to shortcut. Yep. And you just gave me an idea of a bias that we might introduce that there, whereas if I created a chair that was round and it rolled, but its primary purpose was to sit on it, and you first looked at it and just assumed it, you would have brought your bias into the situation that it was a ball, when in fact it's actually a chair.
Yeah, okay.
So, and then that's like abstract reasoning at its most basic level. And what this showed is that we're bringing these biases in our abstract reasoning into our models. And with abstract reasoning, there's a few things that come from this. A classic one is inference. So if I tell you whales are bigger than ants, you could then repeat back to me, ants are smaller than whales. You're inferring from that statement that if whales are bigger than ants, ants must be smaller than whales. That's one idea of.
Okay, I mean that makes sense.
And so this abstract reasoning is the ability to like create this general categorizations, these rules, these links, and then posit theories from them. Yep. So in the past, AI has been criticized for inconsistent reasoning. So, for example, you might say whales are bigger than ants, but the AI might get it incorrectly to say that ants are smaller than whales in the past. What this paper actually investigates is, yeah, but humans are also inconsistent in their reasoning. So what happens? How does AI compare to humans in this situation?
Okay, I mean that makes sense because I mean we saw a couple episodes ago we were looking. I think it was Imogen that did that breakdown of where it messes up, and it is a lot of stuff like that. It's like 3 balls to the left of 2 blue boxes, and it'll make everything blue because it starts to just spew these sort of categories across everything within its brain. So
I'll jump into.
this paper,
Sorry.
yeah.
So the way they did it is they took this chameleon model, 70 billion parameters. It's already trained. They weren't there to improve the training of it, except they did do a little bit. And they gave it 3 different abstract reasoning tasks, kind of things that you'd be used to on a general intelligence questionnaire.
Are we going to do a little cheeky self-test here?
I'm going to give you a good one.
See how we compared.
So the first one is simple inference, which I've told you, which is whales bigger than ants. The next one is a syllogism, which is a multi-step inference. So it would be Elliot makes a podcast. All podcast hosts have microphones. Elliot has a microphone. And then the question would be, is that true? And the answer is yes. Kind of proud I thought of that one off the top of my head. But anyway, moving on.
That's good. I don't know where you would have got the inspiration for that one from.
And then the third one, which is the hardest one and probably the most difficult to explain over audio, but hey, we'll give it a go, is called the Wasson or Wasson, WASON selection task. And it's all about once again inferring. And I'll jump into the example in a bit when we get to it. So they gave the AI these 3 tasks and asked it to perform, and they compared it to humans. But they also gave it 3 different types of tasks and questions Base.
Hello, Pub. Back to base.
Sorry, it's at 45 minutes if you need.
I'll forget that, but that's all right. I'll listen to it back and cut
So
it
they
out.
gave the AI 3 different data sets and questions from 3 different validation sets. And the first one was, we're going to give you information that is consistent with human beliefs. So whales are bigger than ants. That checks out, right? You know, that is consistent with what we believe about ants and whales. The second one is that they've given it a data set, a validation set where it violates human beliefs. So one example there would be puddles are bigger than oceans. That violates your belief as a human being, but in this context, you're only meant to be paying attention to what that logic puzzle says itself. And then the third one is they just gave it nonsense. And so they said vacuities are greater than viscoities. Just like absolute nonsense.
True.
And so they did those 3 validation sets across the 3 problems of simple inference, syllogisms, and Wasson selection task. And it's crazy. It's crazy. They perform incredibly well on all of the consistent with human belief tasks. They fail miserably. They are worse than chance with the violation of human belief validation sets across all 3 tasks. And they perform better, but worse than chance in the nonsense ones, except for the Wasson selection test, where it kind of just performs as good as random chance. So what this takeaway is, we are teaching them. We are teaching AI our biases, and obviously this all comes down to the data set and what you give to train your AI. But it's just wild to me that we're just training it to be as bad as us. And as I said, what is like as wild to this as wild, and what is wild about this is that it's exactly like the performance at these like violating human beliefs are basically exactly the same as humans. We just taught it to be like us.
Yeah, which shouldn't make any sense because it does not have a learned experience about like whales and ants.
Exactly. So we've taught it these biases. And so the question then comes from this is like, okay, well, is the next limit on AI just like, are we the limit on AI? Is it not data? We can't keep blaming data. Obviously it comes down to data at some point, but like, what other biases are we teaching AI? And this paper kind of calls for like this formal education within pre-training of your models to like stamp out human biases, because there's hundreds of other biases that we could introduce. This is just in language processing. This is just in language processing. This doesn't include all of the biases we have around selection, all the biases we have around like cognitive dissonance. Like, what else are we teaching these models?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, in this case, given that the nonsense prompts can still make sense, so like qubits are bigger than floblobs, and then you have to say like floblobs are smaller than qubits. Like you should be able to have an unlimited amount of training data if you're allowed to just make shit up and still follow some sort of semantic rules. So it's interesting that this problem shouldn't exist, but like very clearly
And
it
so
does.
this the like really bad results were on the zero shot training, which I'm going to give a definition to for, but please correct me, which is basically you just give it a prompt and it's never seen a prompt like that before. So it's like giving you a question cold on an exam that you haven't studied for. They then did it on few shot. They did a few shot prompts, which is you basically give it to like train it across 2 to 5 prompts so that it kind of understands what you're getting at. And the performance increased a little bit, especially in the like the simple inference and the syllogisms, but not in the Watson selection task. But it didn't increase that much, so it wasn't like, oh, we've just given this model, we haven't let this model study for this exam, so it's going to fail miserably. It just wasn't really able to do it.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I've been actually had a couple of YouTube shorts come up in my feed today that were sort of around this topic, tying back to old. Is it Gladwell, the Thinking
No,
Fast
it's
and Slow?
Kahneman, and yeah, it's Kahneman. Yeah,
Or is it? Is it? Yeah, yeah. So the example they gave is like it takes 5 donut machines 5 minutes to make 5 donuts. How long does it take 100 donut machines to make 100 donuts? And like a lot of people, they very quickly go, well, 100, because they just like pattern match the A, and then B. The answer must be B. The answer is 5 minutes, by the way. And I'm sure there's a lot of stuff like that as well. And just thinking like the AI, probably any AI model that we can imagine, well, that sort of exists today really is about finding these shortcuts and learning the quickest representation. There's not as much effort put into scenario considerations and I guess that slow thinking type mentality, which I found really interesting.
Do you want a Watson selection task?
Yeah,
Okay.
let's do it.
So this is it's hard, and I apologize if I butcher this because it's actually meant to be a physical one. But okay, I'm going to give you 4 cards. They have all cards have something on either side, some character on either side.
Yep.
The 4 cards that I present to you have a D, an F, a 7, and a 3 facing up. They all have something on the other side. And I'm now going to give you the premise that Ds have 3 on the other side of it.
So Ds have 3s on the other side.
What cards do you need to flip to prove this? Obviously trying to do it in the minimum number of cards.
Well, just I'm cheating. I've seen these problems before, but I'm pretty sure the answer is just the 1, right? Just
no,
the D?
You need to flip the D. And you've now proven that D equals 3.
Well, I may have proved that Ds do or don't have 3s on the other side, right?
In this group, if you flip D and you see that there's a 3 on the other side, you've seen there's the 3.
Yeah. So I need to probably
exactly. You need to throw to 7 because you need to show that a D isn't on the other side of the 7. And most people just flip the D and the 3.
Yeah, got him.
So that's the one.
Yes. Yeah. Good one. I knew that you didn't have to flip the 3 and the reason being is that like you never said that 3s had Ds on the other side or nothing else had 3s, but
so the modus is it's called the modus apparently, which is not 3 implies not D. But anyway.
Yeah.
And I've been calling it the wrong model the entire time. Sorry, it's called the chinchilla model. No,
not the community.
Chinchilla. Sorry.
Oh. Which spirit language model are you?
Whoopsies.
We did talk about chameleons last week. There you go.
Yeah.
Chinchilla. Yeah, nice. That's interesting. So what were there any takeaways about like how do we avoid this
Yes.
stuff even in the
So the
context
call
of
for
language
this, the call for this from this paper is that we really need to consider pre-training beyond just achieving a very specific task, and we need to consider how can we pre-train to really remove these biases that we introduce ourselves. If you're on video, you just saw a pup join the screen for a second.
I saw the guess. Yeah, that's staying in, by the way.
Good.
Yeah, okay. So pre-training makes sense. And I can see, as we said a minute ago, like if you can use nonsense and you can generate this sort of seemingly infinite amount of valid examples,
and
seems possible.
I think the problem with this is just identifying that there was a problem in the first place. And now that we've actually identified this bias, we can correct for it. Like generally biases aren't that difficult to understand and comprehend, but they're difficult to spot in the first place. And so now that with these models, this chinchilla model, we've shown that this bias exists, version 2 is going to be able to train that out or working on removing that.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, it makes me think of Copilot, given that that is a very technically specific use of a language model. And like how could some of these biases then apply to a model like Copilot and make sort of logical inconsistencies or something that's common in human behavior? And like, will Copilot ever, and it won't, but one of its ancestors, will it ever like propose a brand new software development paradigm? Or will it just rehash, MCV and the classics because that's what we've trained it on?
I think if it does, if it ever gets to that point, it's going to be including the average mistakes that the average person includes. Like this is what this shows is that, and by mistakes I mean biases. It's going to perform at a level that is what humans let it perform at a human level until you're able to either account for this or teach it in a way that doesn't introduce these.
Yeah. And I mean, it's fascinating to me, even just going even more meta with language, in that, like, we have nouns and verbs and adjectives. That is how we have chosen to like construct language, and there's more grammatical constructs, but like using those three as an example, like that is our AI is going to probably have to have some internal conception of like verbs, nouns, and adjectives, which is fine because it's primarily going to communicate with us. But you do wonder, like, is there a more efficient underlying structure for language that if we had generated that, the performance of our language models would be 10 times as good as they are? And it's just that we've designed a language formalism or a grammar for human-to-human communication, which is not super optimized for like human to computer to human.
There's a reason why we write code not in English. It's a new language. And I think this is the like very, very interesting meta point about all of this is like, what are we limiting AI by? How are we limiting AI with the way that we think? And at what point will it break away from human thinking? And what will we discover when that's the case? Like I remember there was some thought experiment in, I think it's either Einstein's book or Stephen Hawking's book. I've forgotten which one it was, but it's like, thinking about some of these like concepts is like trying to imagine a new color. We just like, that isn't a variation on everything else. It's like, we just can't do it. But like, what could AI bring to these concepts by thinking about it in a different way that doesn't have our biases involved?
Yeah. What was I listening to recently? It was something about we're trichromats. We have 3 different color bands. But apparently, like, some subset of the population has 4. They're like tetrachromats, and they did experiments around like the names of colors and things. And they had different groups like trying to come up with names of colors and categorizations of colors. And when there were these tetrachromats in the group, the language still moved towards, I guess, this like more accessible trichromat model, even though there was potentially the ability to like pick out colors and put them in different boxes by this small subset of the population. Because it's almost like lowest common denominator communication protocols.
Sorry, someone's at the door.
That's right. We'll be right back.
And we're back. And the package is delivered.
We're back.
That's not code.
What's that? It's not code. No, right. That's not an innuendo. I thought you meant that's not like code. See?
Yeah,
Look
yeah.
how fucked our language is. What a waste.
No, I meant actually I meant code.
Viscuties.
I meant code,
Fluties.
not innuendo. Makes it weird. Okay, so it's couple of side cool points about this paper as well is that one is you can see the difference in the 7 billion parameter model versus 70 billion parameter model. Not much increase in performance in the first task, which is the simple inference. But as soon as you go to that multi-stage inference or those Watson selection tasks, the like 70 billion parameter just like crushes the 7 billion in terms of performance. The second thing as well is they actually reckon abstract thinking came to humans about the same time as language, because obviously at that time we were able to communicate the thought that we had abstract, but because it relies so much on being able to like link them and then communicate them, they think abstract reasoning came along with language and basically the creation of collective nouns.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of makes sense. It also gave us with that internal dialogue, it gave us a link there to be able to like talk through things. And the old, the Romans and the Greeks, their philosophy was all around talking about stuff until you worked out problems.
What?
Not that language was invented by them, obviously. It's not what I'm implying. Before that, I just grunted.
Yeah, so it's a very cool development. It's really cool that
for sure
that they were able to identify this. So takeaway from this is, to me, is not only consider what biases you have in your data, but what thinking biases have you introduced into your models.
Yeah, and it opens up the the ultimate question of like, is there a way to work on artificial general intelligence that is like pure, away from all of these things? Like, can we somehow seed intelligence in a vacuum without introducing any of these biases?
And what can we learn from that?
Is that a
like
good
what
thing?
Could it teach us? What biases do we have that we don't even know about yet?
Yeah, 100%. There's a story I remember which is about broken spaghetti. I don't know if you've heard this one, but it's a little cute little story. I don't know if it's real, but this kid's watching his mum cook pasta, and she gets the pasta out of the packet, and she breaks the pasta in half. And the kid says, "Mum, why are you doing this? Why are you breaking the pasta in half?" And the mum says, "Oh, I learned that from my mother. It's just a way to cook better pasta." And then the kid's not really convinced, and he's like, "That doesn't make sense. Can we talk to grandma and find out why?" And then so the kid calls the grandma and says, "Hey, grandma, why do you break the pasta?" And she says, "Oh, I learnt it from my father. He loved to cook pasta, and that's just the way we always did it. It makes better pasta." And he said, "I'm still not convinced. This doesn't really make a lot of sense." So calls up great grandpa. This is a very the Mediterranean diet, I guess. It's a lot of generations, and gets on to great grandpa and says, great grandpa, why did we break the pasta? Does it really make better pasta? And he says, my boy, when I was cooking, we didn't have a lot of money. We only had a very small pot. So I cracked the pasta so it fit in the pot. And, just how these narratives get passed down and it becomes truth. And I think there's something to be thought of there.
Yeah, the
It's a great story.
narrative fallacy,
about
right? Where
pasta.
you can you tell the story to
Yeah.
meet the observation. Sounds like an annoying kid. Just
Yeah. And his name was DALLE2.
And the takeaway from that story is Mediterranean diet. Plenty of pasta, cut in half.
Yeah, apparently. Although I feel like if you're in a part of the world where they eat a lot of pasta and you break the pasta, you will get broken.
Actually, like the modern day story about that is that a paper is written on the benefits of breaking your pasta in half, and health groups pop up around the world touting the benefits of it with Twitter, like subreddits and Twitter channels that and Twitter categories just for people focused on the pasta breakers.
You bet. Yeah, definitely. Exactly. There's a subreddit called Pasta Breakers. I am sure. Very good. I mean, we're coming up to 1 hour, despite a couple of pup and package related interruptions. Anything before we clock off that you would like to plug or share?
Well, yeah, like
generally,
if you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, please do. We're now creating quite a fair few shorts that aren't just taken from the pod. Where we've got the book club, we've got the AI deep dive. We're going to have some problem solving lessons as well in there. Elliot's going to be releasing some, I'll say, live streams, some recordings of implementing some models, and we're probably going to break down a few problems and how you think about them with using AI soon as well. So check out the YouTube channel is all I can say. Give us your feedback.
Good. Alrighty. Nothing to plug from me. Hope everyone's having a great time.
See you live streaming. Well, not live stream. See you from Croatia next week while I'm on my holidays.
Indeed. I will be here holding down the fort, so to speak. We are on opposite sides of the world anyway, but anyway.
Well, not in an actual fort, but a fort town.
Well, there you go. Tom will be holding down the fort. I will be at home, as I am right now. Anyway, Thank you. Episode 15. That's a wrap. See you all next time.